I want us to go back to the top of the list with Ohio State. You were talking about the metrics hating on Georgia a little bit because they're replacing so much of their production. Obviously, they continue to churn out NFL draft picks, or really Philadelphia Eagles. The rest of the league isn't allowed to touch them. For Ohio State, they're losing their quarterback too. And for my money, I'll take the Georgia quarterback room over what Ohio State has right now. Kyle McCord is not, from what I have read, seize that starting job and just run with it. So, with a question mark at quarterback, or at least somebody who's taken the reins that's very much unproven at a championship level, what do you see at Ohio State that makes you think, yes, this should be the team that's atop the FPI?
Well, I think the difference is, you look at Carson Beck versus Kyle McCord, and that's a fair argument, right? I think I agree with you. I think on paper, Carson Beck is probably, I would lean towards him as a better overall prospect right now from what we've seen on the field in college. But the difference is who Kyle McCord is going to get to throw the ball to, right? There's
Sure.
not two 1,100-yard wide receivers walking through the door at Georgia next year. They have talented guys. Don't get me wrong. They're going to out athlete most of the teams that they face
Yeah.
on the outside, and they're going to have some beasts that rack up yardage and rack up statistics, but they're not going to have Marvin Harrison Jr. and Emeka Egbuka next year. Easy for me to say. So, I mean, that's really where it comes from for me for Ohio State. And you're playing in the Big Ten. I think the likelihood that Ohio State wins out. Now, obviously, we've said that the past couple of years, and Michigan has spoiled those dreams 2 years in a row now.
Sure.
Just absolutely shattering the hearts of the Buckeye faithful 2 years in a row. But I think it's a little trickier this year for Ohio State as well. I'm pulling up their schedule. Obviously the divisional games with Michigan that they've struggled with the last couple of years. Penn State is a team that I think we're going to talk about later in this episode that we are, all three of us here at the Three Technique are very high on for this
Yeah.
coming year. Their cross-divisional games, they have a home game against Notre Dame, road game against Notre Dame to return that trip from last year. And their cross-divisional games are at Purdue, at Wisconsin, and at home against Minnesota. Wisconsin, a team that I know we've already hyped up as well, that's going to be looking for a big early program-defining win for Luke Fickell. So, man, I don't know. Ohio State, I think if you're asking me which team is more likely to lose 2 games next year, I think it's Ohio State. But I don't think I would bet on either of those two. Ohio State currently at 10.5 over under as well. So you do have to bet, are they going to lose 2 games? And the odds on favorite is, it looks like actually under 10.5 is the odds on betting favorite right now.
Ohio State's got a tricky schedule, and that's I'm surprised. I'm surprised that Ohio State is as much of a leader in the FPI as they are. So they're a full 4 points ahead of where Georgia is. They're three and change ahead of Alabama. So in the FPI metrics, that's a kind of sizable chunk, right? I mean, uh, to give context, that's basically the gap between Georgia and what they're ranking Michigan and Texas down at. That's a little bit larger of a gap, but about a 5 point gap. So to just go from 31.5 to 27.4, like, what does that mean without context? In the system, the algorithm is very confident in Ohio State, but like you just said, they've got to go to Notre Dame. They've got to go to West Lafayette. I mean, how many times have weird things happened in West Lafayette against the spoiler makers, right? That's
Yeah.
probably, now it is a Saturday game, so maybe the recipe for shenanigans and tomfoolery is a little bit reduced by the fact that it's not like a Thursday or a Friday night game. At that point, you might have to pencil that in as a loss for Ohio State. But then again, you take on Penn State, and a relatively difficult charge down the back stretch of the season as well. Michigan State, Minnesota, Michigan. I know that Ohio State has all the weapons in the world offensively, wide receiver wise, especially, and they've got some really good running backs. But when I look at what that defense struggled to do at times, and it's going to be year 2 of Jim Knowles, so we'll see what happens there. You would like to think that a year plus, guys have bought into that system. They know his playbook. They know how to be kind of intelligently aggressive. At the same time, until Kyle McCord steps on that field and is taking a shot under the chin strap in South Bend, I don't know that I'm going to bank on Ohio State even being the favorite in my mind to win the division. I've already said this. I think Penn State is going to win the Big Ten. I would even put Michigan up there kind of right with Ohio State. In my mind, I think there's a really good chance that Ohio State finds a way to slip and lose 2 of these games.
I wonder, we so much of our conversation last year about Ohio State was, are they physical enough when it really counts? And I wonder from you, Mitch, from your perspective, did the way that they played Georgia on New Year's Eve in the college football playoff semifinal, did that answer any of those questions for you? Because it seemed like, obviously they didn't win the game, and that's what's most important, but it seems like that could have been, from a program standpoint, a turning point for the Buckeyes, that they really answered a lot of those questions.
I hope it was, because I would like Ohio State to put up or shut up a little bit. And I think that's obviously what their fan base wants too with Ryan Day. Look, the naysayers that were calling for Ryan Day's job after that loss, come on, guys, what are we doing? Ryan Day, has he won the big one yet? No. But he's consistently put you within reach of greatness. And I think for a fan base like Ohio State, like Alabama, now like Georgia, who just becomes accustomed to that, like Clemson, we heard, the tantrums thrown when they went 10-2, the sky was falling. And it's like, guys, I mean,
remember where you came from, guys. Seriously.
They're still a top 10 team. Yeah, like you guys were lucky to win 8 games when Dabo took over. So I do think that there's, some spoiled fan syndrome that goes on there. But I really would like to see Ohio State either get it done and win a national title, or kind of go away, to be honest. Like, just because of all the media, all the hype. And again, I don't have a dog in that fight. Like, I'm not an Ohio State fan, so take it with a grain of salt. I like the parity in college sports. And so they've been so dominant for certainly the last several years, but they haven't been able to get it done. I do wonder if another year under Jim Knowles' system is going to be beneficial for that defense. But I have a hard time thinking that offense is going to be better than it was with CJ Stroud. I mean, yeah, sure, he had his faults. There were times where the guy didn't know how to deal with a pass rush, but he still went number 2 overall to the Houston Texans, right? Like, a really, really good quarterback talent. I don't know if Kyle McCord is that or not.
Yeah, I mean, the offensive staff at Ohio State is certainly going to have to earn their money. We've talked so much about Alabama not having an NFL caliber quarterback, but I mean, the last 2 at Ohio State, right, were current NFL starters. So it not having that guaranteed locked and loaded guy, and Kyle McCord could certainly be that guy. I'm not saying that he won't develop into that. We just haven't seen it yet. But I think that they're going to have to rely on their athleticism on the outside, like they always have. They're going to have to rely on the running game a little bit more, and that has not always worked out well for Ohio State when they get into these big physical matchups. So, yeah, it'll be interesting. That test at Notre Dame week 4 is going to be fascinating to see how they adjust to that game, because it's not going to be like the one last year. If you remember that game week 1 last year, it was a slugfest. We thought it answered the questions about, can Ohio State be physical, because they played a physical brand of football against Notre Dame. But that Notre Dame offense this year is going to be a completely different animal with Sam Hartman running the show. So, yeah, that's one that I'm circling in the September calendar for sure.
Gracious him. How about that?